Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. The tide is going out. The trends are reversing. The sands are shifting. All signs that the four horsemen of the bond apocalypse are riding into town. And when they arrive, all that you thought you knew to be true will in fact be false. House prices always rise. False. Bonds are safe investments. False. Gold is not money. False. Your toilet will flush when you push the handle. That's completely false. All things that were true are false when the bond apocalypse arrives. Stacy?
Max, for decades we've lived in a world where bond prices have been rising and commodity prices were declining. However, as the crisis hit once that started to reverse. And we see in all of our headlines today the fundamental nature of all the world around us is changing due to these reverse in trends of prices. Pipe swipers take toilets as U.S. homes with plumbing ebb. Amid the worst recession since the Great Depression, pilfering cut the number of U.S. homes with complete plumbing by about 10.4% from 2008 to 2011, according to a U.S. Census data compiled by Bloomberg. That reversed the 5-decade trend. The decay of housing adds another obstacle to recovery in Rust Belt cities already beset by crime and poverty. So there, Max, are now 3 million homes in America with no plumbing at all. That's about 2.2% of the stock. In some cities like Detroit, 19% of homes have no plumbing, 24% in Gary, Indiana, because it's all been stripped.
But they've got cell phones. No plumbing, no indoor plumbing, but they do have cell phones where they can access virtual games and they can invest in virtual property on Second Life or some virtual environment and use a virtual toilet in virtual space. But the analog space of reality is crashing.
The cause of this is that the metal in a typical urban home is worth $1,000 to $1,500, a fraction of the cost, of course, to repair the damage caused by ripping out the pipes. It'll cost tens of thousands to fix it. And in fact, they interview a woman in Baltimore who had installed in a house that she was renovating a $240 water meter. It was stolen within hours, and the person sold it for $5.
Right. The central planners say that there's not enough gold around to create a gold standard, so we're going to keep flooding the market with paper money. That's driving the cost of metals, copper, zinc, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, to all-time historic highs, forcing people to steal it out of their very plumbing to afford getting a ham sandwich, when all they could simply do to reverse all that was recognize gold as a currency and go back to a gold standard. People would stop selling their plumbing, stop pooping in a bag and throwing it over their neighbor's fence, and they would have an economy based on sound money. But that's not going to happen because that would require the bondholders and the banks to recognize losses on their balance sheet, which means that guys like J.P. Morgan and Lloyd Blankfein and Hester here at RBS here in the UK would have to be recognized as charlatans, as financial wizards. You know, they would have to come to reality, but people would rather stay in a virtual world.
Of course, we've had globalization over the past few decades, thanks to these rising bond prices and falling commodity prices. Now, the other trend has been the declining wages. Now, that hasn't reversed, certainly in America. They are increasing in China and places like that. But part of the reason why many Americans didn't notice their declining wages since 1971, when the U.S. went off the gold standard, is that food prices have continued to fall and fall and fall. So it always made up a lower and lower percentage of the average household expenditure. Now, according to John Gapper at the Financial Times, perils of supermarket cost-cutting machines. The switching of horse meat for beef is a spectacular signal that a limit has been reached. So he talks about the declining prices, that the supermarkets have been good in one way, and we've never quite known what's been in these ready meals. But now he's saying this crisis is showing that we've hit a tipping point. The trend is reversing because this changed in 2007 to 2008. The the declining prices with the first of several commodity price shocks. The U.S. use of agricultural products for fuel raised the prices of corn, palm oil, and rapeseed oil, and markets felt the pressure of emerging economies' growing demand for meat. China's per capita consumption of meat has risen fourfold since 1960. So again, trends are reversing, things are changing.
Right. The cost of food was going down along with wages as America was subsidizing the corn industry using paper money and blocking out foreign corn sellers from competing. So it was very anti-competitive. But it's reached a satiation point. They can't subsidize the corn or the cotton any longer, so prices are reversing a 40-year trend. Prices are now starting to move up, but there's no wage increase. So that's the very definition of disenfranchisement or impoverishment. And of course, the food stamp levels have never been higher. Poverty rates have never been higher. People can't afford to buy food anymore. McDonald's just reported that their earnings were suffering because people can't even afford a $1 Happy Meal at McDonald's anymore. That's considered a luxury.
The food stamp usage went from about 11% at the beginning of the crisis and is now at 19.5% in America. So people are relying on food stamps to eat. But the other trend, as you talked about, is the squeezed middle. And this is the other trend that John Gapper in the Financial Times sees, is that the middle has been so squeezed, and you see that in the inequality numbers. 120-something% of all of the wealth created since the crisis began, 120-something% has gone to the top 1%, meaning the bottom 99% have actually lost since the crisis began, and they've gained even more. So this is the other element that he says is in the food supply system, the middle has been squeezed, the most vulnerable. He said the U.S. auto industry once dealt with suppliers in a similar fashion, squeezing them so heavily that the product deteriorated and the makers went bust. Tricky though it is to forge relationships with suppliers in a world where customers demand low prices, the food industry does not have a good alternative. So again, we've squeezed the middle, we've squeezed the incomes, but that's what the oligarchs have been left with now. So America is a clapped out country. It has, it's a disaster zone because the middle has been so squeezed. And yeah, sure, the top 1% have some money and they have indoor plumbing. But the rest of it is not producing any wealth for anybody.
Right, because the average person has been demanding lower prices instead of higher wages. But now it's too late. Those wages are never coming back. Jobs are being replaced by machines and robots. There is no job replacement that's ever going to come back. And meanwhile, the banks are continuing to pay themselves huge bonuses by engineering things like the merger of U.S. Airlines and American Airlines. All this will do is create a non-competitive airline behemoth, which will mean prices go up again, but the bankers will make a lot of money. It destroys competition. And once again, they get paid. The Justice Department, the anti-monopoly department, whoever's in charge of that these days, should not allow something like that to go through because it destroys competition, destroys the economy, makes it less safe. Without competition, safety standards go down. So there'll be more plane crashes. But people don't care about that anymore. They usually watch them on TV for amusement.
Well, he notes here in this article, John Gapper does on the Financial Times, that the same situation has happened to the food industry. There used to be mom and pop shops all over the place, little fruit and veg markets all over the place, and now there's just a few behemoths of food delivery mechanisms. Their profit margin has maintained throughout this crisis.
Right, there's no competition.
Yes, there's no competition where it has come, because we know costs have come up and people are able to afford less. We know they've had to cut prices. Where it's come from is the farmer because, quote, the farmer is a price taker with little power in the market. There is a limit to how far you can get by squeezing suppliers time and time again, says Justin Sherrod, a global strategist at Rabobank, who believes that food suppliers need to have stronger links. Like in Asia, like in Japan, he says that the food supply system is a lot different from what here, where the middle is squeezed and squeezed, the farmer is squeezed to death.
But the mythology of the farmer persists in America. During the Super Bowl,